She wanted freedom in our relationship, then fell for someone else. My name isn't the point. Let's go with Evan, because it keeps this about the story instead of the search bar. I'm a middle school science teacher in Minneapolis. I grade lab reports about paper bridges and vinegar volcanoes, and I have a calendar full of field trips to places that smell like old wood and new plastic. For 7 years I was with Rhea, a photographer who has a talent for making sunlight look like it's listening. People warn you that long relationships die from boredom. Ours wasn't bored. It was busy. She had shoots with impossible call times. I had kids who forgot goggles existed. We high-fived a lot in the kitchen. We fell asleep on opposite couches with Netflix asking if we were still there. We loved each other, we said so out loud, and we collected mugs from thrift stores like they held proof. Last spring, Rhea got into a 3-month artist residency called Cedarline. It's a scatter of cabins and studios near a lake 2 hours north, the sort of place where everything is wood and the brochure uses the word solitude on purpose. The program promised mentors, critiques, gallery nights, and long stretches of quiet people in loud sweaters. She was thrilled in the way that made me want to stand on a chair and clap. Then she said she wanted to try something while she was there. She called it a season of latitude. She read me a paragraph from a book about how routine turns lovers into roommates, how curiosity needs room to walk around without bumping its shins. We were solid, she said, but solid had started to feel like a wall. I don't want to lose us to good behavior, she said. I want to come back with more of me to bring. I knew what she meant before she finished. Not an open marriage. Not rules etched in neon. She wanted fewer labels. Fewer assumptions. Questions allowed, control not. She wanted to see who she was without me in the room, making it easier. If you're about to shout no, I hear you. I also hear the part of me that wanted to be brave. I didn't want to be the man who put a leash on the person he loved. I wanted to believe in us like a math proof. So we made boundaries that felt like adult furniture, once a week check-ins, no sleepovers, no secrets. If feelings started, we'd name them before they named us. I wrote them down in my notes app like a contract with the universe. She left with a car full of plants and film and a jar of sourdough starter she swore she wouldn't kill. She kissed me at the curb with the kind of softness that tries to prepay for absence. I stood on the sidewalk watching taillights shrink until my reflection in the apartment window looked like a person practicing. The first week at Cedarline was text messages full of lake pictures. Sunlight in diagonal sheets across a desk. Coffee rings on a sketchbook. A cluster of strangers around a fire wearing hats that probably had stories. She sent me a photo of the director, Marcus Hale, a former gallery star with the face of a person who suspects everyone is about to agree with him. Brilliant, she wrote. Kind of intimidating. I wrote back something supportive and swallowed the part of me that didn't like the way his hand hovered near her shoulder in the picture like a moon that hadn't decided on orbit. Our first check-in happened on a Sunday night. She sounded winded, happy. They'd done a sunrise critique and a midnight print run. Someone played an obscure album that made the studio smell like cities we hadn't visited yet. I miss you, she said. I miss the sound you make when you finally find your keys. I told her I'd overwatered the basil like a criminal and that her brother had stolen back his drill. We laughed. We hung up. I stared at the ceiling and told it I was fine. By week 2, the lake pictures turned into people pictures. Rhea with Kaya the sculptor who welded grief into shapes that felt like doorways. Rhea with Toby the painter who put a basketball hoop on top of a ladder and called it vertical permission. Rhea with Marcus, again, this time blurry like motion meant intimacy. I told myself not to put a frame around pixels. The second check-in got moved. Can we make it Monday? She texted. Marcus is hosting an impromptu critique tonight, apparently the moon matters, I said of course. Monday turned into Tuesday. On Tuesday she called from a porch with crickets doing a full-throated concert. She sounded coated in campfire. It's good here, she said. Hard, but good. I told her my 7th graders had set a gummy bear on fire in the name of science and that I'd confiscated 3 pocket knives and a snake I'm pretty sure was rubber. We laughed. We said goodnight. I watched her Instagram story later and paused on a boomerang of a whiskey glass clinking another on a table I didn't recognize. 2 hands. One of them wearing a braided leather bracelet like the one Marcus had in the earlier photo. I turned my phone over and looked at the ceiling again. It didn't have better answers. There's a moment you can point to later and say, there. That's where the ground shifted. Mine came on a Thursday when my neighbor June knocked on my door at 6 a.m. because the building alarm was chirping like a desperate cricket and my name is somehow synonymous with guy who can reach the thing. June runs at dawn. She also bakes when she can't sleep. She handed me a muffin and said it had accidentally become blueberry lemon, which is how you describe something that knows exactly what it is. June and I began walking her dog together on mornings when Rhea didn't text until noon. It wasn't a replacement. It was a ritual with a leash. We talked about the weather like we were auditioning for small talk, but sometimes we talked about hard things by talking about easy ones. She asked about Cedarline. I said complicated and watched her not press. I told her our boundaries. She nodded without saying good luck the way some people do when they mean the opposite. Week 3, Rhea sent me a photo from inside a cabin that wasn't hers, wood paneling I hadn't seen, a record player, a hoodie draped over a chair that looked like it had opinions. We did a listening night, she wrote. Marcus has this ridiculous vinyl collection. She spelled ridiculous with an extra C by accident. That's how I knew she'd typed fast. I stared at the hoodie and thought about how clothing learns the habit of a shoulder. I hated that I knew that sentence in my bones. Our third check-in was short. She was tired. I was trying not to host an opinion party. She mentioned, offhand, that the no sleepovers boundary felt juvenile in a community where artists fell asleep in studios. It's like camp, she said. Nobody's counting doors. I said that works until it doesn't. She got quiet and said she felt policed. I said I felt like a person who keeps a promise. She said she had to go. We hung up without a joke. I stared at the basil like it was a metaphor I'd forgotten to water. The next morning, the Find My app on my phone pinged. Not because I was tracking Rhea. Because I'd left an air tag in my bike bag months ago, and she had borrowed that bag when she moved her camera gear up north. I had forgotten about it the way you forget about your own shoulder. The air tag registered a location in Lowry Hill, in the city, nowhere near Cedarline. A little blue dot sitting on a street lined with brick apartments and designer dogs. The timestamp said 2:11 a.m. I put my phone face down like I could press events back into the night. I told myself it was a glitch. I told myself she'd come home for supplies. I told myself the dot was a liar. Then I opened a browser and typed Marcus Hale Minneapolis address, and it autofilled. I didn't drive there. I'd like you to know that. I didn't sit in a car with coffee like a detective with a budget. I went to work and taught kids why salt water boils not really faster and graded lab reports about whether a slinky can model a seismic wave. I sent Rhea a message at lunch, everything okay? She wrote back at 4 p.m., long day. Crit wall plus portfolio review. Call tonight? We called. I asked how she was. She said stretched. I asked if she came into the city. She said yes, quickly, to meet a printer about paper stock. It felt good to see traffic, she said, like that was a personality test. I asked who she stayed with because it was late when the dot glowed. She said Kaya's friend and changed the subject so fast I could feel wind. The week before open studios at Cedarline, I stopped pretending the knot in my chest was anything but rope. I packed a duffel bag with the casualness of a man just heading north for the weekend, though every folded shirt was a disguise for suspicion. June noticed. Of course she did. She saw the way my hands twitched when I clipped her dog's leash. You're driving up again, she said, not asking. I nodded. She didn't say be careful, she said, be honest. The road to Cedarline is 2 hours of pine and guilt. My playlist was supposed to distract me, but every lyric turned into commentary. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot, I was rehearsing lines I'd never practiced before, ultimatums, demands, the word why in 10 different tones. Open studios meant strangers wandering in cabins, wine poured in paper cups, and artists explaining things with gestures bigger than sentences. I walked through spaces full of canvases that smelled like turpentine and ambition. Then I found Rhea's. Her photos were tacked to plywood walls, a series of river shots, light bending on water like it was rehearsing for a role. People murmured haunting and ethereal. She beamed, glowing with the satisfaction of being seen. When her eyes landed on me, the glow faltered, then shifted into something careful. You came, she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt rehearsed. Of course, I said, pretending not to notice Marcus standing a few feet away, explaining his own work to a group of admirers. His laugh carried like it owned the room. We did the polite circuit together, her showing me other artists' work, introducing me as my partner with the same emphasis you might use for insurance agent. I smiled at Kaya, nodded at Toby, shook Marcus's hand longer than necessary. His palm was warm, his grip confident, his eyes dismissive. I could almost hear him thinking, this one doesn't belong in the brochure. Later, when the visitors had thinned and the wine bottles were mostly empty, I asked Rhea to step outside. We walked toward the lake, gravel crunching underfoot like punctuation. The night smelled like wood smoke and unfinished sentences. Are you happy here? I asked. My voice was steady, but my ribs felt like glass. She hesitated. Yes. It's freeing. Challenging. I feel like I'm finally stretching. With Marcus? I asked. Her silence was longer than the question deserved. Finally, "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" She looked at the lake, as if water could absorb the responsibility of honesty. "He sees me. He pushes me. He believes in my work in a way that feels electric." "And me?" I asked. She turned back, eyes wet, mouth trembling. "You're home. Your safety. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. But here." She gestured at the cabins, the smoke, the invisible stage lights. "I feel alive in a way I didn't know I was missing." Alive. The word punched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw rocks into the lake until it choked. Instead, I said, "So which version of you gets to stay?" She reached for my hand. I didn't give it. We drove back to the city together in silence. She scrolled her phone. I stared at headlights. We slept in the same bed but faced different walls. 2 weeks later, the experiment ended. The residency wrapped. The artists hugged goodbye, promising to collab soon. Marcus gave Rhea a book inscribed with something I didn't want to read. She came home with boxes of prints, a tired smile, and a new habit of checking her phone like it owed her something. We tried to patch it. We had dinners where we didn't mention Cedarline. We watched shows where every romantic subplot felt like a heckler. We had sex that felt like math. We whispered "love you" out of habit, like brushing teeth. But you can't staple trust back together once the pages are soaked. One night, I caught her typing Marcus's name into her search bar. I didn't confront her. I just watched. When she saw me looking, she slammed the laptop shut and said, "It's nothing." The lie echoed in the apartment until it rattled the picture frames. The next day, I packed a bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, eyes wide. "To a place where I don't feel like a placeholder," I said. She begged. She cried. She promised it was over, that Marcus was just a chapter, that I was the book. But the thing about trust is once you see someone holding scissors, you don't sit still when they reach for paper. I moved into a small one-bedroom near the school. June helped carry boxes. Her dog supervised. She didn't ask for details. She just made tea and let me sit on her couch while her kettle hissed like a therapist. Rhea texted often at first. Apologies, declarations, bargaining chips. We can go to counseling. We can reset boundaries. Please don't throw away what we built. I didn't reply for weeks. When I finally did, it was one sentence: "What we built collapsed when you chose sparks over stone." She didn't respond. 6 months later, she showed up at my door. No warning. Just Rhea, holding a photo album. Inside were pictures of us, trips, birthdays, mornings blurry with joy. She flipped through them with shaking hands. "I ruined it," she said. "I thought freedom would give me more of myself. Instead I lost the best part. You." Tears blurred her eyeliner. "I want us back." I closed the album. You can't rewind honesty. She tried again. "We were happy. We can be happy again." I shook my head. "We were happy because I trusted you. That's gone. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Not the same way." She left with the album pressed to her chest like a wound. That was over a year ago. Since then, I've learned that endings aren't clean. They leak. They leave shadows. I still see her sometimes in the way light hits the kitchen counter or when I hear a song she used to hum. But I also see freedom in my own face when I catch myself laughing without waiting for permission. June and I walk her dog still. Sometimes we eat dinner together. Sometimes we just sit on her porch while the city hums. It's not a love story yet, maybe never. But it's real. And real feels like a better place to stand than what if. So here's what I know now. When someone asks for latitude, check the map carefully. Sometimes they mean space to grow. Sometimes they mean space to leave. Either way, don't mistake your own silence for strength. Don't let love talk you into contracts you can't enforce. And don't let anyone convince you that being home makes you less than alive. Because home deserves to be alive too. I did something small and mean. I told June I couldn't walk her dog the next morning because I had a call, and then I didn't have a call. I sat on my couch and tried to list all the ways love can be true while trust is tired. The list got sloppy. In week 5, I went up to Cedarline without warning. I told myself it was a surprise. I told myself I'd bring pastries from the good place and make in-person feel less like chasing a radio station with bad signal. The sun was in a mood that day, loud and blunt. I parked under a tree that tried to be generous. The cabins looked like they were made of sentences. The main lodge smelled like pine and coffee and wanting. Rhea wasn't in her studio. A guy with a paint-smeared sweatshirt said she might be in the kitchen. I walked down a hall lined with framed artist statements and photos of people looking brave. When I turned the corner, I saw her. She was standing at the stove with Marcus. He was stirring something in a dented pot like he'd invented heat. She laughed at something he said, put a hand on his arm, and then moved it the way you do when you remember arms are attached to people. It wasn't scandal. It was domestic. That's what made my throat tighten. I didn't go in like a TV show. I stood in the doorway for 1 second too long and then walked away. Outside, a woman in a yellow beanie I recognized as Kaya caught my eye and smiled the way people do when they don't know they're about to matter. "You're Evan, right?" she asked. My name did a little trip on my own tongue. "Yeah," I said. "Passing through." "Ria's been working hard," she said. "Marcus pushes in a good way. Sometimes in a loud way." She lowered her voice. "Sometimes in a Marcus way." Then she said a sentence that opened a window. "Artists get weird here when they forget the world isn't just this camp. Just remember you're a world too." I thanked her. I left the pastries on Ria's desk with a sticky note that said I loved her. I drove home and turned music up loud enough to make the rearview mirror vibrate so I couldn't hear my own thoughts. That night, Ria called before I could decide to let the day stay quiet. "You came up?" she asked, breathless. "Kaya said she saw you." I said yeah, I'd been in the area visiting a state park with my students. "That was a lie. I don't take 7th graders to Cedarline." "I'm sorry I missed you," she said. "I was in the darkroom when I pictured the stove. I tasted heat." I swallowed. "Everything okay?" I asked, using the same words as the text because we were looping. "Yeah," she said too quickly. "Great, actually. We're prepping for Open Studios next week. Marcus thinks I should show the River series. I'm nervous. But good nervous." She asked about my day. I told her about a kid who tried to smuggle a snail into his backpack and the subsequent trial by jury during lunch. We laughed. We did not talk about Lowry Hill. We did not talk about a pot on a stove. 2 nights later, my phone pinged with a message request on Instagram from an account with a name like a dog plus a number. No profile picture. Just a DM, "You should talk to Ria before Open Studios. People are talking." Attached was a photo taken from behind a row of folding chairs, Ria and Marcus sitting too close on the back steps of the lodge, hands not quite touching, their knees angled exactly like people who had forgotten geometry matters. I stared at it until the pixels got tired. I thought about boundaries written in a notes app. I thought about a hoodie draped on a chair and a dot on a map that refused to lie for me. I thought about the way Ria had said juvenile and how my chest had responded by becoming a locked room. I typed "We need to talk." Then I deleted it. Then I typed "Can I come up for Open Studios?" She wrote back, "Of course. I want you here." I went to wash the basil under the tap and watched dirt swirl down the drain. I turned off the water and listened to the apartment be quieter than it had any right to be. And that's when June knocked, holding a leash and a question I didn't know how to answer.